Thank you so much for inviting me and all of you for coming tonight. It's a delight to sort of be back in France. I don't get to enjoy the food, but I do get the company. I have been telling people ever since my trip, which is now, I guess, a year and a half ago, about the restaurant that who was there? I know Sylvie was there. Yes, yes, and Claire. And the escargot was just incredible. So it was is still, I can taste it even now in a very great way. It's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, so we're coming together again to talk about type. And I also want to thank Lionel for doing all of the technical part and the translation and so on, because you do have materials that you'll be using in French or in English if you're an English speaker here. Yeah. So it's very exciting. We're 20 years into the new century, and we are at 100 years since Jung published his maybe most well-known book, although he did many books. Type was only one chapter in one book of all of his work. And so those of you who work with archetypes or other facets of type, anima, animus, shadow, collective unconscious, if it's any kind of depth psychology, then you know about the richness that really helps us appreciate the human condition. So it's not just a measurement of traits, for assigning a career choice or something. Heaven forbid, we don't want to do that. It's about really digging in. So that's the spirit that I come to today, to dig in further. And as you may know, I do neuroscience. And it really has been rewarding now that I have hundreds of people who have, including over 20 people in the Paris who came to donate their brains to science, so to speak. And it's really nice to go through all of this data, also Norway, United Kingdom, India, Australia, and of course the United States, and discover, what are the commonalities between people who identify with the same type pattern, the same preferences, and also what are the differences. There's a very well-known saying, at least that I learned in the 90s about type: every ENFP is like every other ENFP, is like some other ENFPs, is like no other ENFP. So, of course, we can say every ENFP is the same in these ways, or they're all different. But what about that space in between? How many types are there? Jung, at the beginning of his types chapter, talked about two types. He said the introvert and extrovert. And then he said, no, that's not enough. We have these mental functions, sensing, intuiting, thinking, feeling. And each of them is actually very important. Whatever dominates in the personality combined with the introversion, extroversion, then leads to not 4, but 8 types. Isabel Myers read his work and settled upon 16 types. But if you read the end of chapter 10 of Psychological Types, there is a suggestion that there, yes, is more than 8. There might be 16. There could also be 32 types. He's a somewhat ambiguous, Jung is. But then, Jung is known to be ambiguous, to give us room to play. And so as I looked at the brain data, I saw that, we can sort the brain imaging data in as much or as little as we want. And one way I found is to take, as I started with one of my interns, just all of the, at first, maybe 36 ENFPs. Now there are 60 ENFPs in the study. Actually 61, but that I will save that last one for a comment at the end, because Believe it or not, the forefront of the science that I am doing here is actually happening in France, remotely. I'm in Costa Rica right now. I'm not even in the United States. But the great work I'll tell you about at the end is happening right now in France. So, we can sort the data different ways. And I worked with my intern, and we found we could sort into two categories. We did four, but two seemed, like a very good start. And what kind of categories were they? It sort of depended. If you looked at male and female, there were these patterns. We will call them yang and yin, or yang and yin. Carl Jung might call them logos and eros, but those words also have meaning to English speakers. So we thought, why not? I don't remember, Sylvie, maybe it was you who said, maybe yes, we will do yin and yang as the terms, and I love it. I feel like that was the push that encouraged me to do that. But when we looked at people over 25 years, so not college students, we found that actually career was the biggest indicator. That people who were in business, technology, science, law, the military, that it didn't matter if they were male or female, they tended to have this yang kind of brain, yang kind of brain. And then when we looked at people who were in the humanities, the arts, social service, of course, for many of you who are counselors, coaches, psychologists, there's a good chance that this is more your style of career. We found these individuals had, yet again, a different kind of brain. And yet they were all ENFPs. And when I looked closely, I saw that they were meeting their needs, the psychological needs, in the same way. I mean, in different ways. They were meeting the same needs, but in different ways. So that really got me to think, what about the other types, and what about the functions, the Jungian functions? Are there different kinds of sensing? Are there different kinds of intuiting? Not just introverted, extroverted intuiting. But, I'll give an example with extroverted sensing, because there are not so many people with extroverted sensing in the type community. And I think we've all sort of noticed this too. Yes, haven't we? There are some individuals with extroverted sensing who have more of a yin style, I want to say. So what is that? That's going to be more sensuous, exploring the sensory environment, relishing of many of life's pleasures. And that's a little bit more maybe passive or receptive style, although that person could easily be an artist or a musician, so they're creating and composing. And what allows them to do this is to absorb the sensory environment. I don't mean being introverted. I mean, of course, they're like, oh, it's all in the moment. It's live and let live, and those experiences of extroverted sensing. There's also this other flavor, which maybe we might think of as more yang. This is more like physically active, fast, aggressive. They like extreme sports. It's not so much about the pleasures of the moment. It's more about experiencing the extremes of the moment and to enjoy those. So both of them are extroverted sensing, but they experience the world in a different way, or they engage it in a different way. And very importantly for us who work with these ideas, I think we want to know about them, because a person may come and we might think, oh, this person is so physically active and aggressive and so on. Yes, of course, extroverted sensing. And maybe some extroverted thinking or something too. And then we meet this other person who's an artist or musician, and they very much too live in the moment, but it's more enjoying life's pleasantries. And we might think, well, no, maybe they're really an introvert, or maybe it's introverted sensing. I don't know. And so there can be this confusion sometimes. I think we see this a lot cross-culturally. Americans tend to be very extroverted. And so when you meet someone with extroverted intuiting, for example, there's almost like this feeling of the person who is just all of these ideas. And they're almost like they're trying to sell the ideas to you, but you can't even grab onto the ideas. They go so fast. And, you know, in other cultures, like when I lived in Japan, it's a much more, you know, contained, it's much more observant, it's much more polite. And still, there are many people with extroverted intuiting. I even had a student in the United States who one time was wearing the brain imaging cap, and she's just sitting, no task, doing nothing, just sitting. But her brain gets very active all of a sudden. And I asked her, what are you thinking of? And she said, I'm observing the couple over there across the lab and imagining the different scenarios of what they're interacting about. So that is a different kind of extroverted intuiting that is observant, that is still playing with ideas, but is more quiet and contained, is more subtle, is more of a catalyst, the quiet catalyst, rather than the marketer. So I hope this gives you an idea of what motivated me and what I began to notice in the data that already working almost 30 years with the personality, that, you know, I think many of us see these differences. We know we can take two people of any type and find ones that the affect, the style is quite different, but they will both say, oh no, I'm very clear on my type preference. So that's what we're going to look at today. And you might wonder, so we're going to be doing activities, you know, the self-reflection and discussion, some polls, and you might wonder, you know, is there a right way to answer? And there is no right way. It is, you know, we thought, why say 256 types? Because that was close to the number of cheeses in you know, French cheeses, and we don't want to say this cheese is better than that cheese in these different combinations, because everybody has, you know, what is it, their most favorite cheese that is disgusting to someone else. So it's you know, like a very moldy cheese or the very sharp or whatever it is. So we have all these combination of styles. I've been finding recently also that this application is, of course, to help with best fit type, is also very helpful on teams. And as I discovered yesterday morning, I did a small, like a breakfast seminar here in Costa Rica, that the application to couples is really great, because even couples of the same type, you know, they learn about type and then they have expectations, they have ideas, and now this really helps understand, oh, you know, a little bit more variation, a little bit more nuance. It is the nuance I think that we are going for today. Okay, so let's, you know, I want to talk a little bit about Jung, and I'm going to show a picture with this. It is, can I share screen, s'il vous plaît?
C'est bon, j'ai activé le partage d'écran. I activated the screen sharing.
Yes, merci. Okay. There we go. So this is a quote from Jung here. He says, a conscious capacity for one-sidedness. In other words, to be right-handed instead of left-handed. And consciously I choose to, or I know that I like this cheese or that cheese. Or I consciously know in this situation I prefer thinking and not feeling. He said that is the sign of the highest culture. But involuntary one-sidedness, when the person does not know, when the person feels like they have no choice, when the person insists that they must be right, he said that kind of one-sidedness, the inability to be anything but one-sided, is a sign of barbarism. And normally when we think about, personality type and one-sidedness, we're going to be thinking about an idea like this, a diagram like this. So this is for ENTJ. And it shows the preferences. Well, it shows all 8 functions, but it shows the preferences, the dominant and the dominant function, playing the lead role, extroverted thinking. And then the auxiliary function, playing the support role, introverted intuiting. And so we've learned, okay, we want to balance out. If we're using our right hand, then we also, want to use our left hand. We don't want to neglect one side of our body. And if we're using our head at the top, we also want to use our feet at the bottom. So we know to complete this picture. And absolutely, I agree. This is great. This is also the work of a lifetime, maybe several lifetimes. So it's especially because we see the ones in shadow. So there are more than 4, there are 8. Is a lot of work. So I'm in a way going to make it easier for you and your clients, and I'm going to make it harder because I'm going to suggest that even with our dominant function, even with our auxiliary function, we might be quite biased. And how can we find balance in the use of our own functions? I feel personally this is very important purely to enjoy life, because I got to 35 years old some time ago. And I thought, actually age 36. And I said, I think I've learned everything I need to about type as a theory and the framework. Of course, I could learn to be a coach or something, but all of the theory I know, I don't need to learn anything more here. And I thought too, my own dominant function, there's nothing more to explore about it. It worked very well for me. I have a creative project to do. I do what everyone with introverted intuiting would do normally. I sleep on it. And then I magically get up and just start typing and the words come out. And, that sounds very easy, but that's the benefit of having the dominant function. I am so happy to tell you that at age 36, I was very wrong. And that I discovered there was a whole other side to my own dominant function. And it took until my late 40s, so I would say the last 5 years, before I began to understand, there was this whole other experience. And I talk now regularly to a female INTJ, and she knows what we're doing here. And she said, what you're describing, this whole other side you discovered at midlife, I was already doing that as a child and a teenager. And it was my experience of introverted intuiting that she is now discovering. I don't think it has necessarily to do with male and female, but it's a very nice, I feel, an example to show that we can always keep growing in our dominance and then even in our auxiliary function and so on. And I think sometimes too, it can explain if we meet someone of a certain type and we think, this person has reminded me, I just don't get along with them. I don't like this type, frankly. I will never date this type. I don't want this type as a coworker. That kind of feeling. Of course, we don't want to think that, but maybe it's a feeling. But that person is unique. They have their own development. They have their own biases. And so here we're going to get a language to describe what some of those biases are, so that we can help that person, or as client or friend or ourselves, to work around them. Okay, let's define these. Analytic and the holistic. I use analytic and holistic because those are terms used in neuroscience about the brain. But to be honest, I feel that the yang and yin are probably the most accurate terms for what we're looking at. What is this yang or analytic style? It is more active, it is focused, it's fixed. Why have many when we can have one? Why sit around when I can do something? Why be quiet when I can talk about it? Why wander when I can be focused? So this style often appears, I found, in my brain imaging clients, more common in business, law, science, technology, and among youth, age 15 to 25, more likely to be male. That disappeared later, but still, this is what we see. And the yin style is more receptive, more diffuse, is more yielding. Why limit myself to one identity when I can have multiple identities? Why be so overly focused? That will lead to tunnel vision when I could be more open-minded. Do I always need to push my agenda or desire, or can I entertain and host other people's agendas and desires? And I found this style appears more in the arts, the humanities, social service, and among youth, age 15 to 25, more likely to be female. What really convinced me that career makes a big role is when I looked at the ENFP data, and I had many ENFP males who were in the arts because I was in Hollywood. And they were overwhelmingly this yin style. They're all like 30 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old, and so on. So they've been doing their career for many years. So these were two differences, and they showed up in the brain wiring as long-term habits. But they're not types. They're not inborn, I don't think, because we know scientifically the reliability of this data is about 2 years, and people can change. I've changed somewhat in the 15 years of doing brain imaging data. So without further ado, okay, I was going to say one example, and then I'll take a question or two, and then we'll get to the exercises. So imagine you're driving a car. You have two kinds of attention. One kind is focused. So all of this, the attention is all about perception, but it's what kind of perception? One kind is focused. So you're looking for the sign as part of following the direction because you have a goal, a set destination. And we say this is more analytic or more yang. Also, maybe you drive aggressively. You know where you're going to get there. You don't have patience for, oh no, we're not stopping to get an ice cream or a croissant or something like that. We're going. The other style, the other kind of perception is global. As you pay attention in a diffuse way to the whole traffic environment. And we need that because a car or someone on the bicyclette comes and to the street, and we need to be paying attention to everything around us in some way. So maybe we're also not concerned about the destination as much. The other passengers in the car say, why don't we stop here and go shopping? So this is a more holistic style. So this is a little bit of an analogy of what happens in the brain, and to show it's not about perception and judgment, because these are both kinds of perception. And in fact, they're both concrete perception. It's just that one is more focused and more yang, and the other is more diffuse and is more yin. Okay, so before we start with the sensing one, does anyone have a question? Yes, a very good question. Is there a link with J and P? When people first look at the data, they will think somewhat, yes, this is either, like when we look at yang sensing, that must be like sensing with thinking or sensing with judging. And when they see the yin extroverted sensing, they might think, oh, that's sensing with perceiving, or sensing that's more with the feeling function. And I believe that there is a bias in that direction, yes. But it is not exclusive, because you can have two ENFPs and one will be quite yang and one will be quite yin. And yet they are both perceiving types, and they're even maybe the same age. They could be different sex, they could be quite a different profession. So I feel that even though, yes, as you say, there's some bias, that mostly it seems about career, which I think then can lead to confusion if someone like INFJ or ISFP is in a science profession, a technology profession, and they score as a thinking type, or people think that they're a thinking type. And they wonder, oh, am I a thinking type? Or maybe they're INFP, but they're in a profession that is like a business environment. And they think, well, maybe I'm really INFJ because I have to be so organized or focused. So it seems that actually is more about the career. But there is a slight bias, as you say, yes. I think the other letters do make some difference. Okay, let's take a look at sensing. I think that will reveal any questions we have. So you hopefully have the French version. In fact, since most of you are French, I'm going to do a new share, and I will share en français. It is the actif physiquement. It is on the upper left there. So these two styles of extroverted sensing, and then below that, two styles of introverted sensing. And I'll give a brief verbal description, and then we'll take a little poll and find out where everyone is. So with extroverted sensing, the one style on the left is the mover, on movement. And that is more, as I said, physically active, moving others, is more aggressive. Aggressive doesn't mean like physically aggressive. It might, but it could also mean aggressive sales campaign. Is eager to do something. Does not stand back. Tackle problems directly. Alert for the relevant data. If they don't get the relevant data or the relevant sensation, then they're like, no, next. Courting danger. Focusing on actionable options for what is the bottom line result. They can be impulsive, they can be strong. This might be slightly crude, maybe not. And reading this, we might think, oh, this sounds more like a ESTP. Male stereotype is a male ESTP. But actually, I've seen people of all the sensing perceiving types can have this style. And in fact, even if you are, say, ENFJ or INTJ, where sensing, extroverted sensing is not your preferred, but is something as part of your personality, you can ask, how is this for you? How does this feel? I think a stereotypical example of this style would be Donald Trump at the extreme, because it's a very movement, aggressive, very direct, alert, only interested in it looks relevant, almost doing things that court, I want to say, the odds. It's like a success or failure, looking for danger. Is impulsive, says things that are crude and inappropriate. So that's an extreme example. Of course, there are many other people who will just have more of this, but more polished, In contrast is this, we'll call on the right, is the sensate, or the sensoriel. And this is absorbing sensory experiences, enjoying life's pleasures, trust the rich sensory data. This kind of person I have met, they love to travel from one place to the next, just enjoying going to the beach and to the mountains and taking pictures and singing songs with friends. They prefer fun, relaxing activities. Of course, relaxing activity might be, let's jump in a winter ice pond. Still, that's a little bit extreme, but if it feels good for them, then they might do that. They notice other people's motion, and it's very much about getting in sync, like with dancing. And it's a very sensual style. This person has a sense of like how to move with the other person. And there's this appreciation for beauty, and the fine things, not fine things because they're socially acceptable or traditional, but because it's just the pleasure of it in itself is a very nice, and tend to be more the artist, the more graceful, more inviting. And that is that style. Then when we look at introverted sensing, I have also noticed these two styles. Now, these are not the definitions of the functions. I want to say that these are the way the functions can express themselves in a person's life, in a culture and society. So the brain develops, and the brain develops to give us practical skills. So these are not definitions. They're just the expression of it. So this style, the défenseur, is the defender. Is my grandmother is a classic example of this. Is acting as an anchor, as a defender, on guard, guarding others, firm sense of culture and history. Oh, this hasn't been done before. Why would we do this now? No, this is going to destroy, all of this work that we did. Why are we going to make this change if, everything works? Sticking with the strongest impressions from the upbringing. So very much Carl Jung described introverted sensing as being about the impressions that we form from sensory experience, especially in childhood, and we carry those with us through the rest of our lives. So this person is very anchored in, when I was a child, the world worked like this. Or when I was a child, that experience actually was terrible, so let's improve it. I want to keep everyone safe. They prefer convenience, familiarity. Generally, if there's a big change that's proposed, they will block that change. So they are more traditional, but tradition does not mean always mainstream. Tradition could also be the own tradition, like in the United States, Native American defender is defending their Native American tradition, which is a tiny minority of 1% of the people, but it is still a tradition. And to them, the tradition is what helps sustain people to be civilized. This is maybe the kind of stereotype we have of sensing judging types in the workplace. The person who is difficult, the person who resists. But they have their reasons for doing this. They have their impressions from the past. They value culture and history, and they really want to keep things civilized and to keep things convenient and familiar. So if you want to introduce a change or to convince them, you need to convince them that this is going to sustain what works. This will be convenient. It will not be such a huge change. You will see many things that are familiar. We can say that. And then finally, we have the hearth. So this is more the kind of introverted sensing we might see at home. But, and we might think, this is more like sensing, feeling, judging type. But it's not the case. I have met thinking types, sensing thinking types that are also the hearth style. Maintain home and traditions, draw on a huge memory bank of sense impressions. Feel grounded, adapt to the group's changes and flex, to be flexible to what others need. And they prefer comfort and safety. So there's still these introverted sensing typical values that are there. They're also very sensitive to subtle sensory variation. So if they do cooking at home, And then they go to a friend's house or to a restaurant, and they have some, I don't know, fish or bacon or something, and they're like, oh, this was not cooked quite the right way, because they notice that little variation that does not match their experience. So this is I went into more detail with this one because I want us to be able to most of us here are intuiting types, so to really appreciate the variety of sensing. And we're going to take a poll. The poll will be which of these 4 kinds of sensing do you relate to the most? Knowing that really this is more gentle, like a scale from 1 to 10. Or it's like a pie. And the pie chart is 20% this and 40% that and 5% something else, and so on. It may also vary with the context or relationship. But for the purpose of the poll, we will keep it simple, and then we will do some sharing and the question and answer about it. So know that the nuance will come out in the discussion. So I will return to this, fantastic, thank you. So here is the poll: Yang or Yin extroverted sensing, Yang or Yin introverted sensing. And you might consider you can vote for maybe what you show the most, but also think about what is it that you find most easy or attractive in someone else, which might be different than you. You just, in the back of your mind, you can think about that. Yeah, and then I will go back to this now. I just wanted to advance that. Okay, and I think everyone has probably had a chance to vote, yes? Yeah. Okay, and there we go. Okay, fantastic, thank you for sharing this. So interesting that in the type community, we have one of these 4 flavors of sensing that is very unpopular, and one that is more popular than the others, for sure. Of course, who does not like to simply relax and enjoy the pleasures of life? I've done this with younger people in the United States, and who are in the type community, and it was also quite similar, that they prefer this yin sensing. So I suspect there is like a subculture bias here, a little bit of a bias. But know that many of you, when you go work with clients, you are going to encounter people who are this yang introverted sensing, which is very much not your type or your flavor. So then it's about learning how to work with that when it's quite different. Yeah. Great. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay. Without further ado, let's take a look at extroverted intuiting and introverted intuiting. So this is, I felt this is a very important, there are so many intuiting types in our community, and to understand that why is it that not all ENFPs or INTPs or whatnot are the same. I suspect this is also sometimes people wonder, oh, am I INTP or ENTP? Am I INFP or INFJ? Is because the type descriptions that we write and the kinds of examples we give from people might be biased sometimes in one style or another. Like Americans tend to be this promoter style of extroverted intuiting. So I will talk more briefly about these and then let you read. One is the marketer style, the upper left there, putting on a show, pitching many ideas. Quantity of ideas is more important than the quality, because they're searching for that one thing that's the advantage, that's outside the box. Very good at recruiting other people, relying upon strong energy of ideas. So it's a putting out that energy to shift the situation. And they're okay with certain uncertainty. And this risk is usually mental risk. It's not physical risk. It's going to be mental or economic or something like that. The catalyst is that style of observer. When we notice the patterns that are subtle, negotiating toward a novel outcome, more relaxed, more using humor, having a disguise, including and promoting others, searching for the highest quality potential possibility. So they're very much still focused on potential possibilities. This is not about being nice, but it is about moving the situation, really moving it, but in a way that really is magical and invisible. That through the power of storytelling, through the power of jokes, misdirection, that people will suddenly find, oh, we've moved over here. How did we move over here? Is because the catalyst was gently, quietly doing the work in the background and also in the foreground. The style tends to move around, both of them. But one is very obvious and noisy, and the other one is more quiet and subtle. Then with introverted intuiting, this is, of course, a special interest to me because it's my dominant function. And I go back to when I was, a child, a teenager for sure, in my 20s and 30s for sure, this visionary style, the visionnaire. It's, what is this? It's sticking to a singular vision. Oh, there's this vision out here for the future, improving society or myself, the relationship, whatever it is. This could be feeling type 2, visionary. Is, I see this vision for how the relationship can be. Let's move to that. There's impatience. There's certainty. Certain insights are just so profound and compelling that they're like truth. You don't let go of them. There is a capacity to take a realization and to talk about it, to turn it into a principle, and to apply concepts in a complex way. And for them, they can be like this guiding spirit. What I mean by guiding spirit is the person who motivates others purely through the power of their vision. But this is not, the only way to do introverted intuiting. What is this other style? So this oracle style, which is something that was new to me, holding lightly many interrelated insights, connecting to the many facets of the archetypal world. This is actually Carl Jung's version of introverted intuiting. He did not hold to his ideas very strongly, not gripping them. He's like, yeah, there could be this and there could be this. I'm not saying he was introverted intuiting type. It's just the way he did introverted intuiting was the oracle style. This person is open to transformation. They don't paint a vision for other people to follow. They are open to being transformed by a vision, by the unconscious. They innovate oftentimes, but that innovation is more guided by the needs and questions of the group, or of society, or of the problem that they're working on. Is really trusting the unconscious in this style. It's like in the Greek times, the oracle that you would go to, and the oracle gives the answer. And they usually have some kind of aesthetic practice, spiritual practice. So this is like the guru, the Indian guru. But it could also be the person who is interested in science, for example, but they don't have a big vision that they're driving towards. It's being comfortable with many different things and seeing where that takes them. Still introverted intuition, though, because of that connection to the archetypal world, the unconscious world. So we will take the poll, and then we will take questions and share thoughts. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Yes, so now we have our results. And we see here the more balanced, a clear favorite. Not a surprise among people who are interested in type, who are in the helping profession, coaches, psychologists, counselors, educators, to have this more catalyst, extroverted, intuiting style. And probably fewer people here that are what is it, business entrepreneurs, pushing the latest technology opportunity, something like that. Elon Musk is not here in the room, but I imagine he would be the visionary and the promoter. And so this I feel is there's a type plays some role, like thinking or feeling preference, but a lot of it is when young is male or female, with the males more the yang style, teenagers I'm talking about, or people in their early 20s, mid 20s. But we do retain some impression of the bias throughout our lives, and then the career choice as well. So all of that adds up. Okay. Let's, in fact, this is, is everybody else able to see this result or only me? Everyone can see it? Yeah, okay, parfait. Okay, so let's do some question and answer now, because we're doing fine on time, and we will have plenty of time for questions at the end too. But yeah, let's either share some insight or ask a question, whatever you like.
I would like to start with a question, if possible, Mr. Nardi.
Yes.
So I was wondering whether, well, I've come from Objective Personality, Dave Powers and his crew, and they discern between masculine and and when, for example, when two functions, when one of the functions on an axis, meaning like sensing, is masculine, the other has to be feminine. You were talking about like a spectrum, a pie chart of some sort. Is it here? Do you find the same thing here as they find with their system? Like one preference in the sensing department, for example, equals or leads to another the opposite preference in the intuitive department there.
Yeah, no, very good question, because one of the, I want to say, superpowers of type compared to, say, five-factor model or something like that, is that it is about development. And the more we can infer successfully about a person's developmental needs, the more effective the framework is. So it's a very good question to ask. If we know a person's pattern, some of it, such as, for INFP, maybe it is the catalyst style, and then as we'll see later, it could be the quester. Okay, so is it maybe feminine and masculine there? Are they reversed then in the unconscious with the opposite functions? When we read Jung, he talks about the anima and animus. And in fact, you all will be having a speaker coming up talking more about the anima. And Jung says that generally this figure is going to be carrying our opposites in a variety of ways, especially the fourth function with the inferior function. So that feminine and masculine, yes, because that's what anima and animus are similar to. They're quite similar to that. So we would think so. In practice, I know, why am I forgetting his name? This is so funny. John Beebe. John Beebe has been working with type and practicing as a psychiatrist for about 60 years. And, which is longer than I've been alive. And he says in his practice, he has observed that the anima or animus is appearing in the person's dreams and in other areas of their life as the opposite sex in some way, about 2/3 of the time. 2/3 of the time. So enough so that we can say that there's a bias, but not so much as to say it is a rule. And I would want to point out, this is where I mentioned, like, it's not, because you're coming from OP, it's not a coin toss here. It is either one or the other. Usually when the functions are well developed, a person has access to both as they get older. I do believe that it's more stark and strong when the person is younger, when they're 18 or 25 or something like that. But when they're 50 or 60, then a person could be introverted intuiting, and they relate to both, and they do both. So then it becomes harder to say what is the opposite. So I suspect that is the issue, is that we cannot take we can say there's a bias, and I would say from my experience using this model in the other groups that I did last year in the United States, that there is a bias for the opposite to be along, is going to be, the opposite function is going to be opposite to some extent in this flavor as well, but not necessarily. and it's like 2-to-1, like a 2/3 of the time. And that may be in part, it might actually be closer to what you're thinking, but sometimes it's hard to know what is the person's really like a deep preference. You know, I can look back and say I'm definitely the visionary style of introverted intuiting, which OP would say is the masculine style. But you know, I very much see, oh, there's this other oracle style, and that came out of encounters with extroverted sensing. And I would say when I was younger, I had more also though of the sort of yang extroverted sensing style, but I got a lot of feedback from my parents that, oh no, that kind of style is bad. You know, you should not be rough and aggressive and so on. You know, in fact, as we look at both styles, we see society tends to encourage the more pleasure-seeking, passive extroverted sensing because it's safe. You know, none of us here usually are gearing up to go to war. Maybe we played with swords and machine guns as children, you know, fake ones, toys, but we don't do that now. Nor do we push people or get into fights or something. I mean, we used to, but now if you do that, then, you know, the police are called and there's a big problem. So I think there's always, what I'm saying about this is there's a cultural overlay as well that adds to the complexity of it. So my first step is wanting to know, like, how does this person relate? And yesterday I found out in the workshop I did that actually I didn't even introduce type really. I said there are these 4 domains: thinking, feeling, sensing, intuiting. People checked off for each. We had discussion, and they didn't even need to learn type, and they found it very helpful. And they could discern what is what. So to answer your question definitively, I would say yes, there's a bias in that direction, but it's more statistical bias.
See, what I was asking was, I clicked the yang part in the sensing department and in the intuition department. I was thinking, why? And now that you talked about like preparing for war, that was actually why. Because I leaned normally when I was a child. I leaned in the sensory department more towards the yin side, but I had the feeling that I had to protect myself. So kind of the yang side grew and grew and kind of took over at some point, while I still like the yin side and I love it even, but I can only access it in a relaxed state, if you know what I mean.
Yes, yeah. No, that's a wonderful example of you know the role of development and environment and the choices we make. And as long as you feel you know how to access what you need for your own satisfaction, and that keeps you growing in some way, then you know that's what's important. Yeah, thank you very much for asking and for sharing your personal story as well. Yeah. Maybe we have time for one more question, and then we will do the last 2. And remember, by the way, you can always approach me on LinkedIn or Facebook. You know, just friend me and send me a message with questions. Then I'm happy to take those too.
Yeah. One more question, if possible. Maybe you already replied. It's about, I was wondering if there is a relationship with between the yin and the yang. Let's say you have a yang and I, the visionary. Would you have a yin SE? Is it
right? So that very much is the thank you, Adrien. That was Adrian's question. But a little bit more roundabout way. And by the way, I want to introduce everyone to Adrien, that he and I have been working together for a few months. And if you are interested in what I am doing in terms of personality and neuroscience, and you would like more interaction in French, then you have somebody local who is a native French speaker. So, you know, just so you know that Adrien is here. Yeah,
I would be happy to provide the service.
So
Sorry, Dario, could I just ask one more question? I was just wondering how these relate to the 16 types. Like, could we assume that INTJ would be more visionary and INFJ might be more the oracle?
Right. So this is the natural inclination, because we're going to think of a male engineer INTJ or scientist versus a female INFJ psychotherapist or artist. And for sure, it will align, like you say. But if we meet a female INTJ artist and a male INFJ who works in business,
Yeah.
then it will be reversed.
Right.
And I have gotten very good feedback just recently, even from a male INFJ. He said that this chart solved the problem of finding his best fit type, because he said so many type descriptions sounded like, after we talked about it, he said sounded like they were written for women. And he said, he says, no, I have like a vision for my business and all of these things I want to do. And I realized that I'm INFJ, and this gave him permission to have his type preference. Right. So again, yes, absolutely. And this is where I feel when we work with clients or groups, when we are writing type descriptions, to keep in mind that there are, of course, population biases. So there are more male INTJs, so more male visionaries and more female oracles. But anyone can be any style. I work all the time with a female INTJ now. And since she was a child, it was the oracle style.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, very good question. And that's why I'm very passionate about it. Yes.
Yes, it's very subtle. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so without further ado, to make sure we also have time for thinking and feeling questions. And yes, so we will take a look, here we go, at the flavors of thinking, the different ways that they can show up. And we see here the manager style of extroverted thinking. And there's also what I couldn't quite find my favorite word for this, builder, but it could be crafter, craftsman. And one is very much the manager, that style you see in business. Speaking logically, confidently, ambitious. Everything is about business. Is like life is business. I don't mean life is about money. I mean, it's about the business of living. There's this organizing mindset of managing others, managing resources, speed, profit, usefulness, maybe. Yeah, I mean, typically, because that's what leads to success. So many times we're going to encounter people with a thinking preference, including, by the way, I've met INTJs who have worked in organizations as executives, and they do this style. Personally, I don't do this so much. I do the other style as an INTJ. I'm the helpful hard worker, although I only work for myself for the most part. Efficient, frugal, economical, timely, focused on doing the work correctly. I don't mean correct to someone else's expectation. It's correct according to the facts and the data. And does it work? Is it functional? Avoiding distractions. Optimizing, comfortable with complexity and multiple projects. So this is more the extroverted thinking that is either the, like accountant. So that could be ISTJ accountant, but it could also be a person, extroverted thinking, that is more focused on not being so harsh, not to being so confident, not everything is about business, but still mindful of all of the things extroverted thinking cares about. Efficiency, economy, timeliness. And I think this is particularly important to focus on, because this is so part of most societies, Western societies, that even if you are a feeling type, ask yourself, when you do thinking, what kind of thinking do you try and do? And that is, especially for ESFJ and ENFJ, who are extroverts, but get pushed into doing sometimes these thinking roles, the extroverted thinking, which can be unpleasant. What are people expecting of you? What are you attempting to do? There's also the two introverted thinking styles. And I really have to thank, I go back, I have to thank Linda Behrens. I go back about 25 years ago to lunch. I had lunch with Linda Behrens and David Kiersey. Many of you know David Kiersey's name from his famous book, Please Understand Me. And what's so interesting is Linda Behrens is so very much the systemist TI. So she is the one, the yin style, the systemician is, and David Kiersey was, he's deceased, but so much the ideologue. And to see them sitting at lunch, even though they have the same principles in many ways, they did not actually, the same type even, INTP, but their styles were very different, we can say that. So the one style is, the ideologue, is very stubborn on principles. There is this one correct framework. It explains everything, is very precise. This person provides expertise, logic, guidance. Any new ideas that come in are defined or categorized according to the central principle or framework. If somebody says something which violates the framework, then they are going to speak up and in some way to correct the error, the bad thinking, the incorrect approach. So it's a little bit, this is our stereotype of the introverted thinking person who's very difficult sometimes to deal with. It is very nice though when this person is actually correct, then the framework, if the framework is correct, then their guidance is very helpful, even if they don't deliver it well. It is still very helpful to get. The systemist, the more yin style, is about taking these multiple points of view, shifting perspective, finding the patterns in the chaos. So it's not about holding to one framework, it's about finding patterns and defining those, finding and defining. Notice how the system scales, that what you see at the small scale also holds at the large scale. So they apply their principles, but this style is more fluid, it's more soft, is more, let me hold your hand, is I show you there's different ways to look at this, to reveal the underlying principles. We will discover them together. They may already know them in their head, but they take this style of let me help you discover it. They see people, art, nature, technology, all of these things are very interrelated. So there's a strong sense of interrelationship, and then understanding and finally finding leverage is a part of it. They're still doing that. So it's still introverted thinking. And again, we may feel, well, one side, the ideologue, is more maybe sensing and male. And then on the other side, yin is more intuiting and female. But that's not, again, really the case, because, my friend Catherine, or Kathy, a graduate student when I knew her at UCLA, INTP, very much the ideologue, very much so. Also, there are, it depends upon profession. So a person in science or engineering very much could be ideologue. But the person who is working as a therapist, for example, must learn how to take multiple perspectives and to help guide the client to see those perspectives in a gentle way. And so is applying the introverted thinking in different ways. Okay, let's do our poll. Ah, fantastic. Wow. Okay. Again, what a striking contrast. Most likely, for those of you in organizations, well, at least in the United States, I know you will have to deal with people who have the Yang extroverted thinking manager style. And yet, among us here, there's a great preference for this Yin introverted thinking style, which can be very helpful, because then we can flex to the other points of view. And in fact, this is introverted thinking is something that I learned to practice in my 20s as a graduate student and working with INTPs. And I learned this Yin systemist style. And so that's, I very much appreciate how useful it is. Yeah. Great. So we will do the feeling, and then we will have the final question and answer. Okay. Where is, I lost my window. There we go. Okay. And here is styles of feeling. This is sometimes can present with paradoxes, and I believe, how do we say, in the type world, it is in the type community, it's known that those with introverted feeling and those with extroverted feeling often can be really like, have conflict with each other. More so than among the different thinking types. And what is the source of this? I believe a lot of it is not so much extroverted feeling or introverted feeling. It is about the yin and yang style. So, for example, yang extroverted feeling, when it encounters introverted feeling, if there's a difficulty, then is going to be quite strong. And the same for the yang introverted feeling. So let's briefly talk about these. What I would call the shepherd or the berger is announcing values and prescribing the best actions. They see people also who are not included, so encouraging them to join the group, to corral, like a shepherd would. Actively work to fix relationships. So they see a problem in the relationship. Let's sit down and discuss and find some kind of solution or compromise. They tend to be very inspiring as speakers, as orators, and they're willing to make sacrifices, and they ask others to sacrifice in order to meet the needs of the group. This is a very different experience than the yin or host style of extroverted feeling. The kind that's sort of the stereotype of like, family, community, friends. We like having harmony between people. Oh, how nice of you to come and visit. Can I make you some coffee? If they get negative feedback, they're very sensitive to that. They don't want negativity. They're accommodating to other people's differences. They can be self-sacrificing, even to people they disagree with. So this is, of course, a codependent relationship that can develop here too. So they're very different styles and how they show up in the workplace or at home. For somebody who prefers extroverted feeling, they can show both. For everyone else, perhaps there is a bias, maybe even a strong bias. I think there's also cultural bias too, as typical of the thinking and feeling. And then with the introverted feeling, there's this classic introverted feeling of the life quest. What is the truth? How do I find moral clarity? How do I align my behavior with my beliefs? How can I make the world a better place through my own personal actions and choices? Not about pushing others, just, you know, internally. So aligning their quest with their identity. Often, you know, they're listening to their conscience, or they maybe have a teacher or guru. And if their feelings, you know, they try and contain their feelings so they don't impose on other people. And this again is a style that tends to be younger, shows up more for men, but also more in areas like a business and yes, as you know, technology, science. So it's going to be, oh, you know, I'm developing this business, this technology, not because of a huge interest in technology, but because they have a quest about maybe medical technology that alleviates suffering for people. So this is why they do it, you know, because they believe in bringing healing to the world. And how can we do that? We can bring healing through this technology or this business. There's also this romantic style, more yin style. And this is one I very much relate to. This is this life of a deep, quiet feeling, listening to, and how do we harmonize with the voices around us? Not to conform to the group, but because these other people bring lessons, they bring voices. And I found repeatedly in the brain imaging data, introverted feeling types are very good at listening. I mean, unless they choose to stop listening, that's a conscious choice, but very good at listening. Pursue multiple soft quests. So it's not one thing, it's a lot of little things. Is like at the table, there's many small different kinds of cheeses. They allow room for inner and outer conflict. It's very important to understand that we can have conflicts between behavior and identity, and we can't really remove those. You know, they're part of the human experience. So it is a more like existential, romanticist kind of experience of introverted feeling. And identity is something subtle, is diffuse. If you ask them, who are you? They would be like, well, you know, and then they're going to write a novel. You know, that's not they're not going to tell you, but in order to answer the question, they might have to, you know, go write a novel to do that. And in every relationship evokes something different in them that is, again, part of the human experience. So let's do our poll, and then we will discuss. Okay. And here we have a definite little, you know, bit of an emphasis with the quester. And I imagine a number of you even, you know, we say yin and yang, that there's women who have selected the introverted feeling quester. Pilarine is, but overall, you know, all of them are represented here in some way. Yeah. Very nice to see. it'd be great at one point if we had a panel of, say, INFPs or ENFPs, any it could be ISFJs as well, and hear like how each of them experiences the feeling differently or expresses it differently. And of course, if there are questions, then let's take maybe like 7 minutes of questions. The thoughts are good too. If you don't have a question, you can share a story. Also, no, it doesn't have to be a cognitive response. You can also describe how you feel.
It feels like I'm, well, the only part where I couldn't really relate to the one side that I didn't choose was with the thinking, which is kind of interesting because I feel like I dabble in both sides, like from time to time, depending on the situation that I'm in. Is that an experience that you have yourself? Like, does it come and go? Do you have experiences in both sides throughout your life?
Yes. So, I feel that context is important. And an example would be at times when I was given the opportunity to be a manager, to be in charge of others. And certainly when I acted as a professor and, there's like 150 students, I have no problem being that Yang extroverted thinking style. But for the most part, because I work on my own now or I do consulting or whatnot, I get paid to do things and accuracy is important. So I'm more of the Yin style, not so much by choice, but because that's what habit and context has encouraged me to do. And that I feel has been a little bit like it's circumstantial, and that's why I feel that sometimes people can go in one direction or another in life purely because of their life circumstances. And an example would be, someone who, let's say, gets married young and has children, is a woman, and she doesn't have a chance, even though she's a thinking, judging type, she does not have a chance to go into the corporate environment. Like, it doesn't come up as an opportunity. She's not going to develop those skills. But had she taken a different life path, she might have developed them quite easily. And even as the children get older, she could go into the business environment and be very quickly discovering, oh, actually, I'm a great manager and I'm being promoted quickly. And that's so I feel that there's that element to it. But when I look at my own non-preferences, introverted feeling, I can see both sides. But when I look at extroverted feeling, that's a very low down for me in the stack, the hierarchy of functions. I don't really relate to either of them. I've learned to appreciate the hosting style, even though that's not me. I appreciate it in other people. And I don't know how much choice there is in that. It's unconscious. It's hard for me to say. Yeah, good question. We'll take one more question, maybe, or thought.
We have some comments, some question in the chat. How about finding difficult to choose even between the 4 propositions for the S quadrant, which is my third function?
Yeah. So one is one thing to keep in mind is that the polling we're doing is somewhat artificial. So I normally ask people to rank the 4 options, or maybe if they know about the 8 functions already, we just go through the 8, and then they can indicate a preference, like right versus left-handed, or they can even put percentage. So there's instructions that go with this page normally, and the instructions allow people to, say 1, this clearly, to just check it, but they can also go in and put percentage or something. So I think maybe your difficulty is an artifact, is a result of the instructions. And that you maybe want to think more about like what kind of context you're in, or how other people experience you. Yeah, great question. Okay, if you think of more questions, it's great. I will just cover a few more points that I feel are important.
I have one more question, please. Maybe you already responded to it regarding relationships between functions. Do you like, how will it play? Like, let's say you have introverted intuition, Yang. How would your extroverted intuition be? Like, would you be Yang if you start using extroverted intuition?
Oh, so yeah, so this is like a relationship between the first function and the fifth function, or something like that. Let me bring this up as the image. No, there we go. Okay. So is there anything predictable that can happen here if the person relates to visionnaire? Are they going to then, with extroverted intuiting, relate to the marketer, the prometteur? And that's a very I don't know if I have enough data to say that. Is a very interesting question, because at times I can come across, I know for myself, even though I'm INTJ, when I do use extroverted intuiting, I can do a little bit of the marketer. But generally, I don't like the marketer style, and I don't trust the people who do that too much. Like, I have a feeling of distrust. On the other hand, the catalyst style can be so quiet that I also don't trust it either, because then there's a feeling, oh, maybe they're manipulating things and I can't even see what's going on. So it's really, this is a reminder of John Beebe's work about, the opposition. And it really highlights this relationship between the functions, something like trust, for example. So it's not just comfort or development or knowledge. Like, we need to even be able to trust it in order to get started. I have learned to trust over time the catalyst style is truly able to move the group and individuals, like a therapist, in a very nice way. And I sort of learned to use introverted feeling to detect if the catalyst is doing something that's not good for me. And then the marketer style actually can be incredibly effective at things like marketing and advertising. Like the neuro PQ is the name of the neuro personality quotient, in a way. I didn't think of that, and ENTP thought of it. In 1 second, I asked him, what is a good brand name for my online assessment or my brain imaging assessment? And he said, neuro PQ.
Yeah.
Never even thought of it before. So just boop, it came, out of all of the hundreds of options, thousands, millions, maybe. So it can be. I've learned that when extroverted intuiting is my friend, then is very, very helpful. But if it is that person or that the situation is not my friend, I don't know. I don't think I trust either of them.
Okay.
I have some questions on the chat, Dario, that are a bit linked, let's say. So I have one. As an ENFP, and no doubt about it, I'm surprised to be in all 4 flavors. And then I have another question, and I think perhaps you can answer both. Do you find rules or statistics which show how many people are 100% yang or yin on the 4 SNFTF, sorry? Then how many 3 out 4 yin or yang, or 1 out 4? Then how many are 50-50? And some people react saying, oh, I'm yang on 3 out of the 4 letters. And so do you have any data on it?
Yeah. So to answer the first question, I can think of some other people I've worked with, ENTP, for example, she's a professional in the type community, and she ranks a yin style for all 8 of the Jungian functions. And she realized that maybe this, I mean, she said this publicly or in the workshop, she's like, you realize that's a bias, like it's a problem. Why does she relate only to the yin style of everything? And she's ENTP, and she feels that maybe she has learned through extroverted feeling somehow to be always giving room to other people as a way to adapt to life, and then maybe that's not so good. So now she's trying to learn to be more yang in at least some of the things, including her own dominant function. And then in terms of the statistics, I don't know, because I haven't analyzed all of the type results from the neuroscience. I haven't looked through all 360 or 70 people yet, not all types. So and I didn't, I mean, in the sense of like stopping to count and all of the details and so on. So I can't say yet. But so far in the workshops, it seems, again, that profession and sex, like in the brain data, have the biggest impact. So I'm not surprised by the results we have here from the poll. The poll are very much what I expected from this group. But if I was with a different group of, you know, like professional athletes or business people or engineers, regardless of their type, you know, then we would see a different distribution. So I think that maybe we have to be careful with the statistics. That's why I'm hesitant to do it, because it seems very depending upon the person's background, the sex and the career and the age, and so on. Yeah.
And did you make any, let's say, link between yin, yang and anima, animus? Is it relevant to do so, or to make a link between anima and animus?
Yes, no, I haven't done that yet. No. Yeah, it is a good something to research. Look at the statistics this year. Yes. Yeah. Is for me, I don't know if it, even for me, it's hard to tell. Because it's on the one hand, so extraverted sensing would be my anima, and I see both in me. I feel like the yin extroverted sensing in theory should be my anima, and yeah, I can relate to that. Like that is the appeal, but it's very difficult to get me to actually live like that. You know, even here in Costa Rica, I live on the beach. So every day I go to the ocean and I go surfing and so on. But no matter how much I try and just enjoy it, it becomes a task that I want to push myself. And I so admire, like when I watch the Olympics or something with the extreme sports and the surfers who do like a very difficult things. And you know, I physically can't do that, but there's, you know, I feel like if I had turned and decided to do that when I was young, I could have learned that and I would love it, because it's pushing in a way. And for me to not push is a challenge. I feel I'm very nice, but that is learned. And ideally I try to push. So I feel that, like it was asked earlier by Adrian, that there's like a natural path, relationship between anima, animus, and these yin and yang style, but our lives, the circumstances will push us in different directions. So let's see. Asking for me, do I have introverted sensing? When I look at this, I very much relate to the yang introverted sensing. You know, it's for myself. If I meet somebody else with yang introverted sensing, they might really, really irritate me, or I might get along very well with them. Is one or the other, but personally, I could say that's actually pretty clear for me. Yeah. Okay, so this is a sort of a little thought to talk about here. I'm going to switch to this view. So new share, and then there's so many little windows on screen on this tiny laptop. So my apologies, this is not in French, but what it is there's basically 4 styles here. And these styles are looking at your dominant function and your auxiliary function. If your dominant and auxiliary are both yang, then you will have this upper left dominant style here. It's yang all over the place, basically, especially the first 2, which is the majority of the personality. And then this is me basically taking the brain data and dividing it into 4 instead of to 2. If you have both yin, so you have a dominant function, auxiliary function, both are yin style, then you are in the opposite, the harmonizing. So it's a double yang or double yin. And I think even without an explanation, you could have a feeling for what that's like. Dominant, double yang is decisive, driven, goal-focused, confident, usually a leader in what they're doing, climbing their profession, ambitious. You know, anyone of any type can be ambitious. Like ambition is not something reserved just for some types. You know, and maybe you've also met, it says whether male or female, there is a feeling of a lot of testosterone. And there is that, like in Britain, Margaret Thatcher is probably a good example of the dominant, even for ENTJ. You know, there's this like a really strong style there. And there are ENFPs, you know, we use ENFP of all 4 combinations here. You know, usually the dominant ENFP will be one who's like a company executive, is going to be in some very competitive industry, if younger especially is male, and really has his brain wiring that's more dense in the front of the brain and so on. And then this opposite harmonizing style is double yin. So this is the person that is relational, egalitarian, that is attending to body language, voice, symbols, emotions, values. And again, this can be any type. This might be INTP. It could be ISFJ. It could be an ENFP, who's a more quiet therapist. A culture plays a big part of this as well. You know, what pushes the style. And then the other 2 styles, creative and the normalizing. So I'm the creative INTJ. And by the way, there's an article on LinkedIn that's all about INTJ. And I have other types lined up to write the articles. I just haven't written them yet. I did all the number crunching for ENFP, for ENFJ, for ISFP, ISTP, and so on. I'm ready, I just haven't written them. I know from my own brain wiring that I'm the creative style of INTJ. So the one part of me is more yang, the visionary part, the perceiving function. And then the other yin is the judging function, my thinking side. So I come across, I'm enthusiastic, I like to bring new ideas, I like to spur connection, I like things to be fun, to be novel, to innovate. I have maybe shorter attention span. I definitely am a dopamine type of person. If I speak of neurotransmitters, dopamine, and so on. And then normalizing is the style that looks traditional. And it might be because of culture. It might be because the person is much later in life. And earlier in life, they were maybe innovating or leading or harmonizing. But now their role is to be a steward, to pass on the knowledge, the wisdom, and to be steady. You know, ENFJ, who at the end of life, it becomes the steady person who passes on the wisdom to someone else. So what's so nice is when we look at the brain wiring data, we see, you know, I had a tenant renting from me for many years, ISFJ, who's a film composer. He volunteered for the brain imaging. He has the same kind of brain that I do, but we're different types. We're both creative style. So we got along in terms of creativity. Otherwise, he's ISFJ. So I had to be careful not to insult him every 30 seconds, you know, with something. But as long as it was a creative activity, it was fine. So this is just bringing together what we saw before, but for dominant and auxiliary functions only, and is what I will be writing all the articles on after INTJ, the other ones. It also matches the work of, I will type it in here so you can see it, is also in my book, Dr. Helen Fisher. Okay, she also divides, she found these 4 patterns, and she's looking at the brain, but neurotransmitters rather than brain wiring. And also Dr. Viktor Gulenko in Ukraine. And he has been working with the Russian socionics version of type for decades. And he sees also these 4 versions. They're just a combination of yin and yang in different ways. So at some point we will get something in French. Oh, right, I accidentally, thank you, Adrian. Yeah, I automatically just blindly typed in there. I will have something, maybe on a page of this translated into French at some point. And do know that there were other pieces. The Magic Diamond book, you know, I'm sorry, is not in French, but very kindly, the association has translated the foreword of the book so that all of you can read sort of what the book is about. And it's available on, for those French speakers who do read English, it is available on Amazon France. And I do post some things on LinkedIn as well. And then I just want to finish with this idea that true change shows as behavior change. And to think about what's one insight you gained today or an action that you might take today as a benefit of the workshop, of the conference.